What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Ben on Sports. This is part two, episode two, however you want to phrase it, of the 2025 MLB preseason predictions. It's going to be just like the American League episode, except it's going to be the 15 National League teams. So if you watch the first one, uh, this will be exactly like that one. But if you haven't watched that one, still stay tuned. You're not going to, it's not like you have to watch them in order, but stay through this one. Go watch the next one. Gonna It's gonna be the same order divisions. I'm going east to central to west. So without further ado, don't need to explain everything I did last time. Let's get going with the winner of the 2024 NL East, the Philadelphia Phillies. Got bounced early in the playoffs, trying to make a deeper run this year. Let's see what they did in the offseason, some key additions and subtractions. Key additions: Jesus Luzardo, starting pitcher from the Marlins, added Jordan Romano to be the new closer, added Max Kepler and another good relief back end option in Joe Ross. Some subtractions: they lost Hoffman, a closer, but again, they got in a new one. Carlos Estevez, those are two really good back end guys. They're both closing for other teams right now. And they lost Austin Hayes, a good right handed bat they picked up at the trade deadline, who plays great outfield defense. What does their opening day lineup look like this year? At least as I see it. Trey Turner starting at shortstop. He's a great leadoff hitter. One of the best shortstops in the league. Should be no surprise. Followed by Bryce Harper. Again, those are probably your two best offensive players. Putting them 1-2, I think this is the year Kyle Schwarber finally slides down into a more natural cleanup role. Alec Boehm, another one of your best hitters at 3. Just kind of standard baseball stuff, right? Followed by Kyle Schwarber. 30, 40 home run power guy, just like Harper. You want him not batting lead off. You want him batting down lower in the lineup where he can hit with guys on base. JT Realmuto, a great offensive catcher, one of the best ones in the game. He's a guy who usually going to hit you around 20 home runs, have some decent average, have a decent OPS. I expect the same Realmuto. Max Kepler, first year not paying for the Twins. I wonder what he does. He's always been a guy with a high ceiling, but I think he's never really hit it for whether it's injuries or whatever reasons. Maybe a new change of scenery with surrounded by great players can help him hit the promise that so many people think he has. Nick Castellanos, it feels disrespectful to put him at 7, but there's a lot of good offensive weapons on this Phillies team. Everybody knows what Nick Castellanos is capable of. Another guy with power, going to play decent defense in that outfield. Bryson Stott at second, another guy who's been in Philly his whole career. And again, 8 feels too low for somebody like Bryson Stott, but when you got this many weapons, that's where it's going to go. And then Brandon Marsh, been playing the outfield for the Phillies for the last couple of years. I don't think he's on the same level as some of his teammates offensively. He's going to provide some pop now and then. He's going to, have maybe a hot streak or two, but he's not necessarily out there to play offense. He's out there to play good defense and contribute when needed. And I think he does exactly that. This is, for my money, one of the best offensive lineups in the entire league, and I expect it to see them have success this year, maybe a top 5 offensive season. Rotation is pretty darn good too. Zach Wheeler, obviously your ace, your number one. He's been one of the best pitchers in the league for a while, and he's at the top of that order for the Phillies. And then they go and get Jesus Luzardo. I think being in a better situation away from the Marlins is going to do wonders for him in his career. And I expect to see him to have the season that he is capable of and not the one that he had last year. Aaron Nola, another guy who's been with the Phillies for a long time. I think he's pretty steady. You kind of know what he's going to do, and I expect him to do what he normally does this season. And that's better than a lot of other guys can say, especially at the 3. Christopher Sanchez is interesting to me. Christopher Sanchez and Taylor Walker are both interesting. They're 4 and 5 guys. One of them is going to get moved to the bullpen when Ranger Suarez gets healthy. To me, it's a matter of who. I'm going to be watching closely to see who wins that competition, because this Phillies team has the potential to be super deep offensively with a good pitching staff. Definitely one of the better teams in the league. Notable bullpen arms, their new closer, Jordan Romano, and then two setup guys who, can flirt with that closer role. One in Jose Alvarado, who's closed for other teams before. Ryan Kirkering, sorry, that's a tricky name for me. He he's another guy that I think has some potential to maybe be a closer one day. So Romano is definitely going to have to be on his game. But these are three great options to go to late in the game. And with the offense and the pitching staff, I think that they could be getting a lot of games coming their way, especially um, in the eighth and ninth inning. To return from injury, the two main ones, again, I've already alluded to Ranger Suarez, starting pitcher. He's definitely a top of the order type pitcher. Not there to start the season. I think the Phillies have enough depth, so they'll survive. But you're never going to say no to getting a Ranger Suarez back. And then, a solid utility man who's going to play the field. They're going to do what's expected of him offensively and defensively. And Weston Wilson, it's nice to have a utility guy that can play multiple spots, get multiple guys days off, that kind of thing. But not essential either. Moving on to the Braves, key offseason additions. Well, I think they're looking for an outfielder, guys, and I love the signing of Jurickson Profar. I know he can play some of the infield, but I see him being outfield only for the Braves. And then they also go out and they get Brian De La Cruz and Alex Verdugo. I wouldn't be surprised if those guys don't end the year with the Braves. Definitely not both of them. I don't think there's necessarily that much room, especially once a certain someone comes back off the injured list. But I love this Jurickson Profar signing. He had a great year last year with the Padres. He's had quite a few good years, and I think putting him in the Braves lineup makes the Braves that much more dangerous and makes him much more dangerous. And then Craig Kimbrell, bringing him back, not to be a closer. I think they're just trying to get an experienced bullpen arm. I think Kimbrell, at least after last year, his closing days are behind him. Maybe the Braves can rehab him. Key subtractions, they lost one of their ace pitchers in Max Fried, but I think they'll be okay. Opting to spend money elsewhere. Lost Jorge Soler, but they've replaced him with some outfielders. Travis Darnold, man, I felt like he was a Brave forever. He was one of the key pieces of that core that won the World Series. He's been there forever, and he is gone. But I think that's a position that the Braves can afford not to spend a whole bunch of money on. Charlie Morton didn't have a great year last year, decided to leave the Braves. And then AJ Minter, another later ending bullpen piece gone, and Gio Urshela, super utility that they've kind of replaced in the aggregate. So most of those guys aren't too crazy. They have the replacements ready to go. Obviously, the biggest loss there is Max Fried. What does their lineup look like? Jurickson Profar, I have leading off. A little bit of speed, a little bit of pop. Perfect modern day leadoff hitter. Doesn't swing at balls too frequently. Austin Riley, 40 home run power guy. He's hits. You can definitely rely on him for 30, and he has the ability to hit 40. He's done it in his career. Matt Olson, he's hit 50 before, so that typical 2-3. I expect to see a lot of RBIs from those guys. Marcell Ozuna had a phenomenal year last year, top 5 offensive player in the National League. I expect him to do the same thing again this year, continue to rake. That's a crazy 2-3-4, one of the best 2-3-4s in the sport. Maybe only a team better is the Dodgers, but that's an insane 2-3-4. Ozzy Albies, he's a guy who has some really good years and some not so good years. I think last year's not the year that he wanted, nor is he, and he's also capable of better. I think we get it. I expect to see Ozzy Albies rebound and have a much better year. Michael Harris, all the potential in the world, and he's still scratching the surface. I think he's only going to get better. Jared Kelnick, a guy who's been pieces on many playoff teams. I think he knows what his role is, what type of player he is, what his responsibilities are. He's going to fit in with this Braves team and fill in while Ronald Acuna Jr. is out. Orlando Arcia, I want to say he's the everyday shortstop. But then I'm also like, maybe he is in a timeshare. I think it depends on how well he plays, how well other people play. The job is definitely open. If there's a weak spot on this Braves team, it's shortstop offensive production. I think Arcia is going to be fine in the field. He's going to be fine defensively. What can he add offensively to this already stacked lineup? And then Drake Baldwin will eventually move to the backup catcher. He will not start every day. The Braves have a great offensive catcher incoming at some point in the season. They just need Drake Baldwin to hold it down long enough for him to get there. Rotation, the NL Cy Young winner from last year, reviving his career with the Braves after leaving the Red Sox, and Chris Sale. I would expect to see a similar performance this year. I don't see too much of a dip or too much of an increase coming. Granted, if he increases on what he did last year, he might be the best pitcher in the MLB. Ronaldo Lopez, another guy that kind of rebounded his career last year with the Braves, and I expect him to continue to do so. Spencer Schwellenbach, ups and downs last year, but has a lot of potential. Got better and better as the year goes on. He could be in for a breakout year this year. And then two younger guys, two not as experienced guys in the 4-5 with Grant Holmes and AJ Smith. I can never say the last name. Scheuer. I think both of them, you're competing, and there's a potential where one of the two of them gets to stay in the rotation after the Braves' best, or one of the Braves' best pitchers comes back. You really only need one of them to hit for you to be successful this year, assuming you stay healthy. I'll be interested in that competition. Notable bullpen arms. Same closer, Raciel Iglesias. He's done it for multiple years. He's a consistent, reliable closer on the back end. And then two guys who have great stuff, one of which has closing experience in Pierce Johnson, and then Aaron Bummer. I'm sure he loved getting off the White Sox, and he certainly has performed as such. Again, I think this is one of the more slept on back thirds of the bullpen, or back three bullpen guys in the league. I don't see a lot of people talking about this Braves back end being really good, but I personally believe it is. To return from injury, Spencer Strider, he is going to make that rotation so much better. Joe Jimenez, he's going to be another back end guy who's been really good for the Braves. Sean Murphy, a great offensive catcher who's going to come in, and he's not going to be batting number 9 like Drake Baldwin is. I can guarantee you that. And then an MVP candidate 2 years ago. It feels like 1 year Ronald Acuna Jr. is one of the 2 or 3 best players in baseball. 1 year he tears his ACL. You're hoping he stays healthy this year to add to this incredible group. And man, if Acuna and Murphy stay healthy all year, this might be the best offensive team in baseball, and the lineup will truly be 9 deep. New York Mets, third place finishers, made a run to the NL Championship Series, almost made the World Series, falling to the World Series champions. Key additions, obviously the big one, Juan Soto, the prize of the offseason for every team. Brought him in on a 15-year, $700 million contract. Obviously, he has to produce, but I don't think that's going to be an issue for somebody with Juan Soto's stature. Clay Holmes and Frankie Montas. Holmes obviously has been a closer for the Yankees. They're going to convert him into a starting pitcher. Montas has starting pitching experience. Some of it's pretty good. Some of it's a little bit not great. I think he'll be fine with the Mets, and both of those guys are going to eventually help nail down the starting rotation. AJ Minter is going to help shore up a bullpen that I think was a little bit up and down at times last year. Jose Siri is going to help take up at-bats in the outfield. Great piece to bring over from the Rays. And then some more starting pitching depth in Griffin Canning, even if he ends up in the bullpen. Key subtractions. Hurts to lose Luis Severino, but I think they've brought in guys who can do the same thing, if not better. I feel the same way about Jose Quintana. It hurts to lose Adam Ottavino, but again, he was up and down. I think AJ Minter can do the same thing, if not better. And then Harrison Bader, very good defensively, not very good offensively. I think all around Jose Siri might be the same, if not a little bit better. So this Mets team really did get better in a couple spaces. Even if they might have lost a couple guys, I still think they're going to be just fine. Projected lineup, one of the best 1-2 punches in the sport, Francisco Lindor and Juan Soto at 1 and 2. Heck, one's a switch hitter, one's a lefty. Both players are insanely talented and tops at their position, or at least near the top. Both are top 5 MVP candidates from last season in their respective leagues. If the Mets are going to go anywhere, it's going to be on the backs of these guys. Pete Alonso, obviously returning to the team after a long free agency decision, batting number 3, and I think he's going to get even more RBI chances with Juan Soto batting in front of him and Francisco Lindor leading off. Mark Vientos, I see him more as a platoon guy. I think he gets to start on opening day. And you're hoping he can just keep the lineup moving. Again, I feel like in the MLB right now, even if you don't have a great average, if you can consistently give your team a little bit of pop with like in that 20 home run range, you're going to have a place. And I think Vientos is one of those guys. Brandon Nimmo, one of the most bipolar roller coaster players I've ever seen. One year he's a top 50 player in the MLB. The next year he's not even in the top 300. Once Brandon Nimmo shows up, if the good Brandon Nimmo shows up, this lineup gets that much better. He's a guy that can hit some home runs. He's a guy that's going to have a decent average and be able to steal bases. What Brandon Nimmo shows up is going to have at least it's going to have might tell the story of just how good the Mets are this year. Starling Marte, another guy who has been really, really good, but I think he's on the downside. He's still a good player, but he's not the player he once was. What can an aging Starling Marte add to this Mets offense? Jose Siri, I think, is going to be a good. If even if he doesn't hit a ton of home runs, I don't think he needs to in this group. I think he needs to be a pesky at bat, get on base, and use some of the speed that he has. And if he's able to do those things, it'll set the table up nice for the guys at the top of the order. Obviously, Luis Torrens is kind of more the backup catcher. He just needs to tread water until the starting catcher can return from injury. And really, for me, the biggest question for the Mets is, do they have a second baseman that can regularly contribute offensively, whether it's Luis Angel Acuna, Jeff McNeil, whoever it ends up being? That is what I am watching for the Mets. Rotation, Clay Holmes. I mean, I'm worried about the Mets rotation because I still think that they, at least at the start of the year and really most of the year, I think that their number one, while good, is not as good as most other teams' number one. And I'm a little bit worried about their depth. But Clay Holmes, he obviously had the stuff as a reliever. Can it transfer to him being a starter? Tyler Meagle, I mean, not much to say about him. I think he'll be pretty consistent with what he did last year. An above average starting pitcher that's going to eat some innings. I still think he has a little bit room to improve, and I feel largely the same way about Griffin Canning. I feel disrespectful putting Kodai Senga at 5 because I don't think he's the 5th best or the worst out of these 5. But that's where I have him, and I think that's where the Mets are going to line him up. I think Kodai Senga absolutely has incredible potential to do some great things in this league. And then I think David Peterson is the guy who needs to prove he belongs before these other 2 starters get healthy and come back. Because I think out of those 5 guys, he's going to be the first one they take out of the rotation as guys get healthy. But at the same time, no manager's taking you out of the starting rotation if you're playing and pitching well. Notable bullpen arms, obviously Edwin Diaz is going to be another year removed from a severe injury, which should make him better. When he's on his game, he's one of the top closers in the MLB. Jose Buto, I think, again, back end, shut it down, get it to Edwin Diaz. And then AJ Minter, a veteran guy, has been in all kinds of scenarios. You're not going to shake him, at least easily, adding significant strength to that Mets bullpen. Sean Manaea and Frankie Montas, both getting new contracts. Manaea staying with the Mets, Montas coming over. Both of them are going to have good seasons. Both of them are going to have to pitch most of the year for the Mets to go far, I think. And I think both of those guys know that and will rise to the occasion. Both of them have the ability to be low 3, high 2 ERA guys and get you wins, keep you in games, in my opinion. Francisco Alvarez, their young catcher, best catcher on the roster. Hopefully you get him back sooner rather than later, and then your offense is really cooking because he's definitely better offensively than his replacements. Nick Madrigal's always hurt, former top prospect, never put it together offensively, but he's a great utility piece, can play all around the infield, still has some speed. Maybe he can unlock more of his game with the Mets. And then another bullpen piece in Drew Smith. You can never have enough bullpen arms, especially with how fickle relief pitchers can be. Washington Nationals, I think, despite finishing 71 and 91, they were still a little bit better than some people thought they were going to be. They won some big games. They had some big improvements from some young guys, and that's going to be the story of this year for the Nationals. They can take a step forward, but it's going to come on the backs of their young guys if it happens. They signed some nice veteran pieces like Nathaniel Lowe, Josh Bell, Paul DeJong. Added some former top prospects that maybe haven't hit yet, like Michael Soroka and Ahmed Rosario, and then tried to replace some of the bullpen and pitching they lost in Jorge Lopez. So they're still adding youth. They're adding seasoned veterans to this already great core of young players. And that makes the Nationals scary. I don't know if they're going to compete this year or not, but I certainly think it's not out of the cards, assuming some of these young guys figure out the MLB quickly. And they really didn't lose too much, just Robert Garcia and Patrick Corbin. I don't think the Patrick Corbin loss really hurts them that much. And I think they've done more than enough to replace Robert Garcia in the bullpen. Projected lineup. And I was just talking about the young guys. Look at their top three. CJ Abrams at shortstop. Obviously, he's been in the majors a little bit longer. He started to figure it out last year. Dylan Cruz and James Wood, two massive prospects that got a little bit of playing time, but not a lot. And this is going to be their first full season in the majors. These guys certainly have the talent and all of the natural ability. Can they get the rest of it figured out? And even if it doesn't happen right away, I think it happens eventually. And when it does happen, even the Nationals might be a little bit out of the playoff race, but they're still going to be a candidate to spoil some other team seasons. Nathaniel Lowe and Josh Bell, two guys you can count on for some power and RBIs, hitting in the middle of that order. I'm going to add some good leadership, going to help protect those young guys a little bit because you don't want to walk guys with Lowe and Bell up. Luis Garcia is solid defensively, and I think he has a little bit left offensively to work on and a little bit more ability that has not been realized. He's still pretty young too. Maybe he can join some of his young teammates. Kerbert Ruiz, a young catcher. He's not upper echelon, but he's a solid catcher that's only going to get better, I think, this year. You could definitely do worse at that position. Paul DeJong, adding more veteran presence, somebody who can play around the infield. And then Jacob Young, I'll be interested to see how long he stays there. I still think that there's some other young guys or maybe some other players competing for positions. But Jacob Young could end up being an important piece down the stretch, or he could just end up fading away into the background. I don't really know. And I don't think most people do. Rotation, Mackenzie Gore and Jake Irvin, two guys who pitched pretty well last year. I would say they both had the best years of their young careers last year. Starting at the 1 and 2 spots at the rotation for the Nationals, you got to think if they keep getting better, this rotation's looking pretty darn good. Michael Soroka, another guy like Mackenzie Gore, who's a former top prospect who maybe didn't always have the opportunity and is starting to figure it out. Mitchell Parker and Trevor Williams, very interested in these guys. I don't think they've quite found their footing at the majors, but they have the ability, just like a lot of pitchers I've talked about in this series, to prove it at this level. But it's going to have to be careful of some starting pitchers coming back. He's going to have to prove he belongs or he will get yanked. Notable bullpen arms, same closer, especially after Harvey got traded. Same back-end guy from last year in Kyle Finnegan, former closer in Jorge Lopez. That's a great 1-2 punch, especially with some vet experience. Little bit younger guy. They present a pretty decent challenge at the back end. And then another guy I'm interested in the bullpen because he was signed as a starter, but he's not in the rotation. So I guess he's long relief, but if somebody struggles, maybe they still bump him in. Shinosuke I can't get the last name out. Ogasawara from Japan, coming over first season, coming over from Japan. And sometimes those guys are question marks. You think what the Sasakis and the Yamamotos and the Otanis of the world are going to do, but there's a lot of other Japanese players coming over who you may not heard of. He's one of them. I'm interested to see how he does his first season in the MLB. And then returning from injury, Derek Law, typical middle reliever, and then two starting pitchers, Cade Cavalli and Josiah Gray, who are going to get every opportunity when they get healthy to get back into the rotation, as they have proven it a little bit more than some of the other guys. And then to the last place team from last year, the Marlins, not a lot to say. They might be the worst team in the MLB this year. Maybe not the worst. They're definitely going to be a bottom 5 team. I don't think they're trying that hard to win. And I think it shows in the additions and subtractions. They added Cal Quantrill. Whoop-de-doo, that's not a bad piece. He might be going at the trading deadline, however. And then they got rid of 2 of their better players in Jesus Luzardo and Jake Berger. I don't know. I don't have a lot to say about this Marlins team because I think it's clear they're trying to lose, even though they do have some nice young pieces. You look at this projected lineup, a lot of career journeymen, a lot of people you may not heard of before. Not a lot of excitement coming from the Marlins. But again, if you're a Marlins fan, you're not trying to win the World Series this year. You're trying to increase future assets, right? So here you go, starting lineup. And like I said, I don't have a lot to say about a lot of these guys. Xavier Edwards, Jonah Bride, Matt Mervis, Eric Wageman, Griffin Conine, Derek Hill, Kyle Stowers, Otto Lopez, and Nick Fortes. How many of those guys do you see in the Marlins being a key cornerstone of the Marlins in 2 or 3 years from now? I don't know if I see any of them, quite honestly. Maybe one or two. But yeah, that kind of, I think if you look at that lineup objectively, there's not really a whole lot of a reason to be excited. The rotation, you still have Sandy Alcantara, one of the best pitchers in the game, coming off of Tommy John. Can he get healed? I wouldn't be shocked if Sandy Alcantara's in another uniform by the trade deadline. Their timeline doesn't match with his timeline in terms of competitiveness, and there's a heck of a lot of teams that probably give you quite a few of those future assets you want to acquire his services. Quantrill, he's still kind of younger, but I still don't think he fits their timeline. If he has a decent year with the Marlins, he could get shipped off. Max Meyer could go either way. He's still a young guy with quite a bit of controllability, has a lot of potential. He's shown it. He's been up and down between the minors and the majors. At least he was last year. Dealt with some injuries. I'll be interested to see if they think they can form him into a future number one this year. And then Connor Gillespie and Valete Belozo, I think, fit in with most of the Marlins teams in the comments I made already. This is my prediction for the notable bullpen arms. I really have no idea what it's going to look like for the Marlins. I could see any of these three guys end up being the closer, but I think this is where it stands currently. And yeah, the Marlins, I have not a lot to say because what do you say about a team that's almost intentionally trying to lose? Three of their better players are also starting the season hurt. Connor Norby, he could be a young cornerstone, definitely played well after getting traded to them at the trade deadline last year by the Orioles. He started playing pretty well. He can play multiple positions. Jesus Sanchez, pretty good outfielder. Still has to unlock a lot in his game, but could be a nice piece. And then Yuri Perez could be a long-term starting pitcher. Certainly has the stuff to do it. Unfortunately, he got hit with an injury before I feel like he got too much of a chance at the majors. All three of those guys should be back. And then two more starters, and Edward Cabrera and Ryan Weathers. When they return, it'll give the Marlins some better pitching and better pitching depth in their rotation. I do feel bad if you're a Marlins fan, though. I wouldn't expect too much except for a couple of guys, and I would expect to see some guys be shipped out by the trade deadline. Just like I did with the AL, in this NL portion, at the end, I'm going to look at Pacoda and Fangraphs projection models, look at where I think teams are going to finish, and then average them all together to come with a consensus record. And here you see the chart. Fangraphs has the Phillies stepping back a little bit, but really still being a good competitive team at 88 and 74. Like I said in the last episode, I don't think Fangraphs likes to go to the extremes. You're always going to have teams hit the 90s and the hundreds, and Fangraphs rarely has teams do it. They don't have teams lose a lot of games either. I think they have teams bunched too close together. I think the Phillies might be better than 88 wins this season and probably will be. That's just one criticism I have of Fangraphs. They bring everybody to the middle. Pacoda will spread guys out a little bit more, which is why I usually like them a little bit more. I digress. Fangraphs has the Phillies at 88 and 74 this year. They have the Braves winning the division at 93 and 69, and the Mets and Phillies battling it out for second in the wild card at 86 and 76. And they have the Nationals kind of doing what they did last year at 73 and 89, and the Marlins improving from last year despite losing some good pieces at 71 and 91. I think that might be too optimistic for the Marlins. Pacoda has the Phillies doing a little bit worse at 86 and 76, which was kind of shocking. I thought they would have had the Phillies higher. They have the Braves essentially at the same spot at 94 and 68. Mets, Pacoda seems to like the Mets more than the Phillies. Unlike Fangraphs, where it's the other way around, they have the Mets at 91 and 71. And honestly, out of all the divisions, this is one of the ones that spread out the most at the top. And then Pacoda has the Nationals still kind of doing what they did last year within a couple of games, and they're still within a couple of games of Fangraphs at 69 and 93. And then they have the Marlins doing much worse than Fangraphs, much closer to the team last year, almost right on what they did last year at 60 and 102. What are my predictions? I see the Phillies as a 90-win team at 90 and 72. Still not enough to win the division. I see the Braves at 95 and 67, which will end up being the second best record I give a team in the preseason. You might be able to guess the first one. I have not said them yet, and I have already done an 4 of the 6 divisions. 2 National League divisions left. Do your best detective work there. Mets, I have pushing for a playoff spot like the Phillies at 87 and 75. Nationals, I think they have a positive season with lots to build on, but I still don't think they're quite good enough at 72 and 90. And then the Marlins having a rougher year than the other 2 projections at 57 and 105. As you can see, the average, if you average all of them together, I still have the Braves that they average out. Braves winning the division at 94 and 68. And then the Phillies and Mets, the aggregate has them tying for second at 88 and 74. That would certainly be interesting. Has the Nationals hovering around 20 games under 500, 71.33 and 90.67. And the Marlins floundering, heading towards the top of the lottery, 62.67 and 99.3, hovering around that 100 loss mark. Moving on to the National League Central and the first place team last year, the Milwaukee Brewers. Key additions: Nestor Cortez, Jose Quintana, Grant Anderson. It seems like the Milwaukee Brewers believe they needed to continue to add pitching. And while I do agree with that, I think they could have also added some offense. Key subtractions: they lost Willie Adames, big contract going over to the Giants. That's a big offensive void to fill. Lost Gary Sanchez, good backups, kind of starting catcher, could DH, good if they have against left-handed pitching. Devin Williams, your closer, your best relief pitcher from last year, gone. You did trade, you did trade him away. It's not like you lost him in free agency. And then Frankie Montas is also gone. Where's your projected lineup? The young stud, one of the biggest up-and-coming stars in the game, Jackson Chourio. I think he might be leading off for him this year. He's going to get on base. I think he's going to increase his numbers across the board. Look for Jackson Chourio to have a good power season while also having a higher average. And I think his natural speed and athleticism is going to serve him well on the base pads. William Contreras, probably the best catcher in the game last year, definitely offensively. I expect to see him in that 2-hole, trying to set the table up for somebody who was who's been an MVP candidate multiple times, got hurt, missed most of the year last year, even though the Brewers still made the playoffs. Christian Yelich, he's going to have to stay healthy for the Brewers to be taken seriously, and I don't know if I see that happening anymore at this point in Yelich's career. Hoskins was a nice pickup last year. Good first baseman. You can expect the power numbers, a little bit lower average, but he's going to hit homers. He's going to drive in runs. Joey Ortiz, somebody they picked up in the Corbin Burns trade from the Orioles, showed some great flashes last year, had some cold stretches, also was hurt. If he can build on the positives from last year, he could be a good defensive and offensive weapon for the Brewers. Eric Haas, I see DHing, and these bottom, the 6, 7, and 8 guys I see moving around. I don't think it's going to be the same guys. There's some players on the Brewers that probably deserve playing time that I haven't mentioned, but I believe the Brewers face a lefty, and that is why I kind of flipped it for opening day. But there's definitely going to be some guys coming on the Brewers that are going to have to be important for them. And it starts with the bottom of this lineup and Eric Haas, Sal Frelick, and Vinny Capra finding good and consistent offense. I know Bryce Turing, maybe not a power guy, but when he does get on base, he's going to steal a lot. He almost has freedom to do it whenever he wants, and he will wreak havoc on the base pass. Rotation, that's right. All the research I said right now, there's only 3 spots in that rotation, and they might be throwing a lot of bullpen games. Freddie Peralta, Nestor Cortez, and Aaron Savali, all of which experienced vets, all of which has had some pretty good seasons. all of which are going to be above average players. That's a good start to your rotation, but you need guys to get healthy, I guess, is what they're waiting on. Not a whole lot else to say except it's a bold strategy to start the season with 3 relievers and wear your bullpen out. Hopefully, the rest of the rotation gets healthy quick. Bullpen, another, I think, not underappreciated back three for a bullpen, and Trevor Megill, the closer, Jared Koenig, and Joel Payamps. That's, it's not the best in the league, but it's still pretty good. And the Brewers bullpen was effective last year, and I think they can still do it this year, even without Devin Williams. And then listen to this group of pitchers returning from injury. Brandon Woodruff, he's probably the best pitcher on the roster when healthy. Coming back from Tommy John, I think he'll return early season, instantly be the best pitcher. You just hope he comes back successfully. Jose Quintana, another savvy vet, knows what he's doing. He should slide into that rotation. DL Hall, he has a young guy that the other part of the Corbin Burns trade, has some starting experience, has some bullpen experience. I don't know where the Brewers are going to want to put him, but definitely an interesting lefty that could go either way. Tobias Myers, another starting pitcher. Aaron Ashby, a great back end piece, and I think he might slide into one of the setup roles on the Brewers. And then Blake Perkins, a young outfielder who's going to have a big effect on the team this year. Starting hurt, but I think if he can get healthy quick, get up to pace, he makes this Brewers team significantly better, especially because I think they could use a reliable offensive weapon in the outfield. Moving on to the Cubs, a team trying to make a big push at the playoffs this year. You see with all of these key additions, Kyle Tucker made a big trade with the Astros to get one of the best outfielders in the league. Matthew Boyd adding a great starting pitcher. Ryan Presley adding a closer and a really good one at that. Carson Kelly helping shore up that catcher position. Justin Turner, guy who's won World Series rings, can play first and third. I see him mostly at first. Can give you good experience for some of these younger guys. Can also still go out there and hit you 15 to 20 home runs with solid defense. And then Ryan Brazier, a guy who has plenty of playoff World Series experience, another great back-end piece. That's a lot of good talent, high-level talent coming in for the Cubs. But who did they lose? Cody Bellinger. Pretty darn good player himself, but I think they upgraded with Kyle Tucker. I know they did. Losing Kyle Hendricks, but I think Matthew Boyd at this point in both of their careers is a little bit better, a little bit more reliable. Paredes hurts, losing Paredes, who you picked up at the deadline, and losing Talkman hurts. Both of the not nearly as much as these other guys, but I think the Cubs still got better if you look at the aggregate of what they bought in and the aggregate of what they lost. This Cubs line is going to be interesting. I think you're going to have a couple positions where they're platooning lefty righty unless somebody absolutely snatches the job. But Ian Happ, he'll steal you some bases. He'll definitely hit you some home runs. But all you need him to do is set the table for Kyle Tucker. I think I like Kyle Tucker more in the 3, but I'm seeing a lot of movement about him potentially being in the 2. Kyle Tucker is going to need to be the star of this offense. He's going to need to do Kyle Tucker things, hit a lot of home runs, steal some bases, have a lot of RBIs for this Cubs team to function properly. Seiya Suzuki, I see him DHing. I mean, he's not a great defensive outfielder, and they have guys on this roster that are, but he still has a good enough bat to be in the lineup, and he's going to be a top 4 piece in that lineup, assuming he does what he's capable of. Michael Busch is a guy I think that could potentially be platooning with somebody like Justin Turner, but I think he'll be in the 4 or 5 trying to clean up, get some guys in when he is in the lineup. Dansby Swanson, you hope he returns. He hasn't been bad, but I also don't think he's been living up to the level of play you originally thought you were going to get when you signed him away from the Braves. And if he can do that, this Cubs team gets that much better. You don't need him to, but it certainly could put you in a higher, more elite place with some of these more elite teams if he does. Nico Horner, a guy who, 15 to 20 home runs, but his hallmark is getting on base and stealing. This Cubs team has a lot of guys that can steal bases, and I look for them to be top 5 in the league as a team at doing so. Pete Crow Armstrong on that list, a phenomenal defensive outfielder. Matt Shaw, I can also see taking turns with Justin Turner because Justin Turner can play third base as well. I don't really know what to expect from Matt Shaw. I can see him having a good year. I can see him having a bad year. I don't think they need him to be one way or the other to be good. I just think if he's average, puts together an average season, and gives you a little bit of offense in the bottom of the order, you're okay with that. And then Miguel Amaya, I think if there is a weak spot on this Cubs team, I think it's going to be offense from the catcher. If Amaya or Carson Kelly, one can step up, even better. I definitely see them platooning until one guy either gets hurt or one guy wrestles it away with his play. This is also still a pretty good starting rotation. Justin Steele had a great year last year. Talented lefty. Sub-3 ERA, I think he finished with. At least he had one most of the year. He's definitely going to win you some games, keep you in some games. Jameson Taillon, a little bit up and down career. I wouldn't say he's necessarily lived up to the hype that he had as a prospect, but he's had some pretty good years. He had a good year last year with the Cubs. Maybe he's finally found the home with the Cubs after traveling around the league. And if that's the case, I expect him to find a way to unlock a little bit more and get even better this year. Shota Imanaga, one of the better rookie pitchers last year coming over from Japan, has a pretty darn good pitch mix, hard to hit. And even though the scouting reports will be more built out on him his second full year in the majors, I do still believe that he also has some ways he's going to get better and show everybody that it wasn't just a 1 year when nobody knew who he was. I think he gets better this year and is still an elite pitcher. Matthew Boyd, again, he's a veteran I trust and rely on. Having him at 4, that's a pretty nice spot. I think the Cubs just need him to eat innings and not lose them ball games. Ben Brown is somebody I'm interested in. I don't know what to expect. I think you just kind of want to tread water because you have another starter hurt that I think can take that spot. But I've said it 18 times already during this series. A, you need pitching depth to be good with how many pitchers go down hurt. And B, if you're somebody who maybe isn't supposed to be starting or the people don't expect to start and you get that opportunity, if you pitch well and you're playing well, no manager is going to take you out of the rotation. And I think Ben Brown is in that same situation. Bullpen arms. Ryan Presley and Ryan Brazier is a great 1-2 punch, one of the better ones in the National League. And Porter Hodge is no pushover, especially after I watched him towards the end of last year. I think Porter Hodge is pretty good. Good back third there. The big name, obviously, Ryan Presley coming over from the Astros where he was so good. And then Ryan Brazier coming over from the Dodgers, making a formidable 1-2 punch, which is so important. If you get those starters getting it to the back end of that bullpen, being able to shut it down is such a good thing, and I think the Cubs have that ability. Returning from injury, infield utility man Vidal Brujan. He's another top prospect who hasn't really gotten a chance with anybody yet. Maybe he can find his way on the Cubs. Maybe he's just destined to always be an infield utility man. He's another guy with some speed, but he hasn't been getting on base a lot, and that's where his problems are. He's still solid defensively. Tyson Miller, he's going to come back and add strength to that bullpen. Again, every team has bullpen arms hurt already. That's going to common theme, and I think that shows why it's so important to have so many bullpen options and why it's so hard to have a consistently good bullpen. And then Javier Assad, I do think will be starting for the Cubs relatively soon. I don't think he'll be out too much longer. And he will definitely make this Cubs rotation better when he gets healthy. The Cardinals, a team that I would say outperformed expectations in some ways last year. They finished the season really well after a bad start. Key additions, they added Phil Maton, solid bullpen piece. I don't know if he's necessarily back end, but he's definitely going to chew up some innings and be pretty reliable when doing so. They did lose quite a bit. They lost Paul Goldschmidt. Again, not prime Paul Goldschmidt, but it was still decent Paul Goldschmidt, and he got better towards the end of the year. Andrew Kittredge is a good veteran reliever. Chews up innings probably a little bit better than Phil Maton. Hurts to lose a guy like Kittredge with all that experience. And then Kyle Gibson, again, just kind of your replacement level pitcher, but somebody that adds a good deal of leadership and somebody that will eat a lot of innings in an era where starting pitchers usually don't eat a whole lot. I think this is a very interesting Cardinals lineup, a mixture of youth and a little bit of age. But for this team to click, it's going to have to come from the youth. Lars Nootbaar, everybody's familiar with him. Been winning the Cardinals for quite a few years now. Leading off, can he have a better year than he did last year? Even though I know he's had some injury problems last year. Can he stay healthy and get back to where he is? Wilson Contreras, pretty good offensive player. That I still think is going to still has the best years of his career in front of him, I think. And I think he's going to continue that way. Brendan Donovan, I liked him coming into last year. He's one of their utility guys they can put anywhere. He's kind of just an average to slightly above average bat. You're hoping he still unlocks more in his offensive game. It would certainly be helpful to the Cardinals if he did. Nolan Arenado, I think his best years are a little bit behind him. He still plays great defense, and he's still a 25 home run guy. He's still going to drive in runs. Certainly still an above average offensive player, even if he's not the elite offensive player that he was not that long ago. I'm interested to see what Alec Burleson does. I still feel like he's a guy that never lived up to what he's supposed to be, but you never know when somebody might put it all together. And then the bottom four of these guys, Ivan Herrera, Jordan Walker, Victor Scott, Mason Wynn, especially the bottom three, all guys that can have all of the ability in the world and just haven't quite put it all the way together. They need at least two of them, I think, to be consistent offensive weapons for this team to really unlock a next gear and be true playoff contenders. Jordan Walker, hit some home runs. Victor Scott, steal some bases. Mason Wynn, be a reliable guy, decent average, maybe a 20-20 threat. Which can any of those guys can do that, get to that level? They have the capability. It's still to be determined. Rotation, you're getting a really good Sonny Gray, and then I start to get a little bit worried after that. You have Andre Palante, kind of, not very well known, maybe for some good reasons, but there's some potential there. And again, just like there's so many teams that need to unlock guys' potential to have a chance to accomplish something special. Eric Fede rebounded his career out of nowhere, I would say, last year. Looking to continue to build upon the success he found. And the Cardinals are an interesting place to do it. But I could definitely see him being one of the better starters on this roster. Because I think the guy that rebounded his career last year and was better than he's been after traveling halfway across the world. I think that's the guy that is going to stick. I think that's the guy we can look forward to seeing the rest of his career. Steven Matz and Mike Mikolas. Two guys have been in the league a long time, two vets that I think have had a rough year or two, haven't performed the way they're used to, the way everybody's used to seeing them. And this is the year we find out if they're just past their prime and that's the new them, or if there's still some left in the tank for them to find, right? And continue to be that, or find a way to be that above average to elite pitcher that they used to be. And I think a lot of the Cardinals' success is going to come from those young guys at the bottom of the lineup and how many question marks in that starting rotation are answered in a good way. If enough of those question marks in the from the young guys and enough of those question marks in the starting rotation are answered, this Cardinals team could and should compete for the division title. But it's always a little bit sketchy when you have that many question marks, in my opinion, because you're taking a lot of risk or hoping that you catch fire in some ways. And I firmly put the Cardinals in that category. I will say the Cardinals have a great back end of the bullpen, headlined by Ryan Helsley. I thought he was going at the trade deadline last year. He was not, but definitely an above average closer. Last year, I would say he was a top 10 closer in the game, and I expect to see the same Ryan Helsley. And Ryan Fernandez and JoJo Romero are no pushovers either, and I think that they're going to do a good job getting the game to Helsley. And I think the more Helsley's going to shut the game down when it gets to him. If just Fernandez or Romero one can consistently get it there, the Cardinals will be A-okay in late innings of close games. The fourth place finisher in the NL Central last year, the Cincinnati Reds, making a lot of moves in and out, picking up some help in the bullpen and the starting rotation in Brady Singer, Taylor Rogers, and Scott Barlow. I think are going to be great pickups for this team. Gavin Luke, somebody who's always had high potential, but between injuries and being blocked with the Dodgers, I think that could be a really good move for the Reds. Jose Trevino and Austin Hayes, solid veterans who have a couple of years under and can produce offensively, even if it's not at the highest levels as some other guys. They did lose some, I think, some pieces, but not necessarily core pieces. India is the best guy they lost, but then somebody like Ty France and Rosario are more. They're not everyday players. They're kind of you put them in when you need to guys, utility guys that move around the lineup a little bit, move around defensive positioning. I think they'll be okay. Jacob Eunice hurts a little bit because he's a solid back end reliever. But again, I think they made out okay with Taylor Rogers and Scott Barlow. This is an interesting lineup. I really like the top of it. And TJ Friedel, Matt McClain, I think those guys could very, very well set the table for your star LED La Cruz. Again, one of the biggest up and coming stars in the game. One of the most exciting players to watch. Has power, has a rocket for an arm, and has arguably more speed than anybody else in the game. If Friedel and McClain can get on, I think Ellie's going to get him home and set up whoever the cleanup hitter is. Now, I do think the Reds don't have a solid cleanup hitter, and I apologize about having Austin Hayes but I literally did the news that he was starting the season on the IL did not break until after I started recording, so I did not have time to change it. But keep a mental note: Austin Hayes is starting the year on the IL, so somebody else will be there. Gavin Lukes and Christian Encarnacion Strand, I think, are both guys who have had potential, haven't always gotten the opportunities the last year or two. And I think if just one of them reaches that potential with the opportunity they're being given this year with the Reds will have a really good offense. Those are two guys I definitely have circled and I'm looking at. Heimer Candelario, kind of a journeyman. He's going to play a lot in the infield, kind of subbing for guys. Really just kind of average, maybe below average. If you can get anything from him, you'll be happy about it. Can he provide a little bit of pop? Can he get on base? What does he do? Jake Fraley, I don't think there's too much more in his game to unlock. I think eventually you're going to need to upgrade this outfield a little bit to be true contenders. Only time will tell if that assessment is right. Then Jose Trevino, you can definitely do worse than an everyday catcher. He's not going to light up the offensive numbers, but I think he's good defensively, and he does enough on the offensive end to keep him in there. But there's also a world I see where he could end up getting platooned as well. This is a pretty good starting rotation that's only going to get better as guys get healthy. Hunter Green had a phenomenal year last year. Finally, I think performing to the expectations that people are expecting, and I think he's going to get even better. I think last year is going to be the catalyst for him. Brady Singer, again, decent year last year, and that I think he will continue to build on. Nick Martinez, Nick Lodolo, guys with some experience. There is a couple question marks in this rotation, and it's really, do these guys are they high fours or low four ERA? I think they have a lot of guys in here that are kind of just that average replacement level pitcher, but there's nothing wrong with that. Having one or two of those guys, especially if they're going to eat innings and keep you in most of the games they pitch. Carson Spears is a wild card to me in this rotation. Who knows what he does? But this rotation will get shored up, I think, not too deep into the season. Notable bullpen arms. Emilio Pagan, experience as a closer, but so does Scott Barlow. I think those guys are going to be trading off opportunities until one of those guys wrestles the job away or one of those guys loses it. And then Taylor Rogers has been awesome with the Giants. I think he'll continue to be awesome with the Reds. And if Pagan or Barlow don't want the closing job, maybe Rogers gets some looks. I think there's a lot of talent in this back end. It's just going to be about being consistent and more consistent than some guys have been in their recent opportunities as closers. And then here in return from injury, I mean, we all know what Alexis Diaz is capable out of that bullpen. The sooner you get him back, the sooner it probably shores up that bullpen and makes it that much better. A pair of young starting pitchers that have a very high ceiling, and Andrew Abbott and Rhett Lauder. Um, I definitely expect to see those guys in the rotation when they get healthy. And I think they could be two of the three best pitchers in this rotation by season's end. And if they both pitch the way they're capable of, this Reds rotation gets much better overnight. Spencer Steer, a pretty good utility player, can play the corners of the field. He's been a top of the order batter for them the last 2 years or so, pretty consistently. He provides enough offensive weaponry, and I still think he's young enough where there's still stuff to unlock in his game. He's not at that he hasn't plateaued yet. That's the way to phrase it. So I'm sure the Reds are looking forward to getting him back because he definitely provides some more offense than some of the guys in there now. And then Tyler Stevenson is their best catcher, definitely their best offensive weapon. And the sooner they get him back, the more production they will get from the catcher position. Last but certainly not least in the division last year, definitely one of the more interesting teams, the Pittsburgh Pirates. Only finished 10 games under 500. You definitely see reasons for optimism with some of the young players in this organization. Can they continue to make a step forward? I don't know, but they definitely tried to add some veterans to help these young guys figure it out. Spencer Horwitz I think is an interesting piece for them in the infield. Can definitely move him around to different positions. Tommy Pham and Adam Frazier, two vets, both have playoff experience. Both know the right way to play the game. Both of them can add some offensive prowess while playing solid defense. Andrew Heaney, a pitcher who's been around the block. Tim Meza, a reliever that's been around the block, and a good a bullpen depth move in Caleb Ferguson. Those are some pretty good additions. Do they make up for the subtractions? Aroldis Chapman, that's a hard one to make up for. Who knows? Again, bullpen guys are so fickle. So they'll have a career year one year, and then the next year have a career worst year, and then the next year be good again. And bullpen arms are the hardest ones to predict, in my opinion. Luis Ortiz lost the starting pitcher. I don't think they're too worried about that for a multitude of reasons. Excuse me. And then Connor Joe, Brian De La Cruz. I mean, I don't think you're missing too much. Yes, they're younger and a little bit inexperienced. Maybe there's more to their game, but I didn't see it, and you can make room for some other guys. And then Michael A. Taylor, another veteran who went to a not very good team, but you're not missing too much, and probably upgraded with Tommy Pham and re-signing Andrew McCutchen. Projected lineup, speaking of McCutchen, he's definitely not the player he used to be, but if there's a weakness to this Pirates team, it's definitely offensively. I think it's a little bit hard to predict this lineup other than their 2 and 3 batters. Why not give the veteran Andrew McCutchen a chance to lead off? Get on base for Brian Reynolds and O'Neal Cruz, your 2 best offensive weapons of the last 2 years. They're going to show up. Brian Reynolds, decent average, going to hit you some home runs, going to drive runs in. O'Neal Cruz, super fast, all the power in the world. Those 2 guys are going to be featured in your offense, and if they aren't, you might be in some big trouble because I don't see where it's going to consistently come from. Joey Bart, I think the book's out on him. Everybody knows what Bart is, what he's going to do. There's not really much room there where you're going to get something unexpected. Key Brian Hayes has never quite hit the peak he was expected to. Still young enough where he has some unlocking, but not quite the power. Still has a little bit of speed though. I don't think you're expecting too much out of Nick Gonzalez. DJ Stewart always has runs where he looks like the best, one of the best players on the roster, and then I feel like he disappears for large portions of the season. Tommy Pham, an old veteran, what does he still have left in the tank? And then Isaiah Kiner Falefa is kind of one of those super utility guys who's on a different team every year, it feels like. He's going to hit some home runs. He's going to run the bases hard. But at the end of the day, is he any better than an average super utility guy? Probably not. Maybe a little bit. But you're not. If your offense has to come from Isaiah Kiner Falefa, you have other problems. Now, the rotation, on the other hand, definitely the strength of their team, and it's going to have to be because I don't see him scoring runs. They're going to have to hold teams to not a lot of runs. Paul Skeens, obviously the stud, arguably the best pitcher in the National League, and he hasn't even really played one full season at the majors. If last year wasn't a breakout year, and I don't know what is, but I'm scared to see it. Paul Skeens already has a chance to be the best pitcher in the MLB this season, despite how young he is. Mitch Keller, if it wasn't for Paul Skeens, would probably be getting a lot more love. The last 2 years, he's been incredibly consistent and solid at near the top of that Pittsburgh Pirates rotation. Reliable guy who's going to probably be in the low 3s ERA. Going to go out there. He's not going to lose you games. He's going to keep you in games and get you some wins. I think he's a very underappreciated pitcher. Andrew Heaney, again, I think he's an above average, slightly above average veteran who can go out there and eat up innings, help mentor some younger guys. And then the two big question marks in this lineup to start the year, Bailey Falter and Carmen Moldinsky. Don't really know what to expect. I don't think there's enough of a book out on either one of them. But again, this Pirates team seems like they can develop pitching pretty darn well. Maybe they can turn some guys, maybe guys you haven't heard of before, and turn them into something. And I'm quite sure that that's what the Pirates are going to be trying to do with a couple of these guys at the bottom of the rotation. Notable bullpen arm. Well, the first thing I want to say is who's the closer? David Bednar has experience in it, but he also has some experience being bad at the job. Dennis Santana, I think, can make a run at being the closer. I would lean towards Bednar gets it because of his experience, but Santana certainly deserves a shot if the Pirates are not sold on Bednar. And then I think Colin Holderman, not talked about enough, really good 7th, 8th inning guy, getting the ball, not going to give up a lot of runs, and get it to the back end of the bullpen. To return from injury, starting pitcher Johan Oviedo has had some decent time in the majors, not a lot of time, but has played well when he's there. He's hurt to start the year, and I think he's only has room to grow. Obviously, Jarrett Jones, probably the second best player and the second best pitcher in the organization, had a really good year last year, can strike out a lot of guys, and forms a great 1-2 punch with Paul Skeens, and a very young one at that. And then Spencer Horwitz, I think, will help add offensively. He can play a lot of different positions. I think it's disrespectful to call him a utility guy because there's a connotation with utility guys that they're not good offensively, and I think Horwitz is. Where do I see the National League Central ending up? I'm not going to go through every single one. You can read it yourselves. But you can see, other than the Cubs, other than Pacoda predicting the Cubs to go 91-71, a lot of the projections for these teams are within 10 games of 500, one way or the other. And really, most of them aren't that much above. They have these teams being fringe playoff contenders, almost all 5 of them. Here's what I'll say about the National League Central. For most of these teams, that'll be true. But I feel like every year in the National League Central, there's one team that comes out of nowhere and way overperforms expectations. And I think this is going to be a year again. Is it the Cubs? Is it the Cardinals? Is it the Reds? Is it the Brewers? Maybe even the Pirates, although I don't think they have the offense to do it. I do think one of these teams way overperforms expectations, and I think the rest are in that high 70s to low 80s range when it comes to wins, trying to build on the future, trying to get their young guys playing to the best of their ability. When you average it out, um, the average of all of these has the Cubs being the only team over 500 and winning the division at 87 and 75, has the Brewers finishing second at 80 and 82, and then the other three teams super close. Really, I would say the Brewers is kind of part of this group, all battling right below 500. Cardinals at 78.67 and 83.33. The Reds at 77 and 85. Pirates at 76.33 and 85.67. So Reds and Pirates, the average has them literally right on top of each other, separated by less than half a game on average. Certainly will be a fun division to watch because any five of these teams, I believe, can win it. And any five of these teams can finish last. You never know what to get from the National League Central. And our final division, the people who won the World Series and finished first in the NL West, the Los Angeles Dodgers, everybody's favorite team. Key additions, and boy, is this an elite list. Blake Snell, high strikeout guy, former Cy Young winner. Roki Sasaki, arguably the most coveted free agent pitcher, definitely one of the most coveted Japanese players we've had in a while. I say that, but the Dodgers got another one of them last year. Tanner Scott, an elite back end piece, great closer, probably going to close for the Dodgers this year. Kirby Yates, another guy who had pretty good numbers in the closer role for the Rangers last year. They have another one. Hae-Sung Kim is going to be a good utility piece for them, and the Michael Conforto, a good platoon piece in the outfield, with maybe some of their other guys. Probably an Andy Pages or a Kike Hernandez. Key subtractions. They did lose Walker Buehler, but Walker Buehler was out most of the year last year and they were still elite. Flaherty traded for him at the trade deadline with the Tigers just for him to go back there, but he was a big piece of them winning the World Series. And then Gavin Lukes, that trade makes sense. They didn't really have space for him on the roster. Gets a little something back, even if it's not a lot, and send him somewhere where he has the opportunity. And, man, this is probably the best four-headed punch in the MLB this year. Projected lineup. Mookie Betts, a guy who can hit home runs, steal bases, hit a high average, do whatever you want. Probably a top 10 player, former MVP in the league. Shohei Ohtani, batting number 2. Became the first guy last year to have a 50-50 season in the history of the MLB. That should tell you how good of a player he was. Oh, yeah, and he didn't even pitch. Freddie Freeman, another former MVP who can hit a lot of home runs. He's going to have a high average. Even as he gets up there in age, I don't think he's going to forget how to hit, even if some of the power goes away. Then you have Teoscar Hernandez, another big power guy. He's going to drive in runs, especially because he's going to have a lot of opportunity with the guys in front of him. Will Smith, one of the better offensive catchers in the league, struggled at times last year. I think he might rebound this year, which makes the Dodgers offense even better, guys. Kike Hernandez, been with the Dodgers forever, been their super utility forever. I mean, great on defense, adds maybe a little bit offensively, but certainly not the headliner here. Max Muncy, a guy who maybe his best years are behind him, still I think has a little bit in the tank, can still hit home runs, and if he can figure out how to be consistent again, adds a great left-handed bat for the Dodgers. Tommy Edman, I think he's going to be a guy that they're going to ask to largely just be a get on base and wreak havoc, try and steal some bases, try and set the top of the order up. Andy Pages, I don't know how long he starts at center field. The Dodgers are certainly not scared to make moves, and they love to have 9 stars. So I'm interested to see how long Andy Pages, it's probably not Pages, probably Pages, isn't it? I'm interested to see how long he sticks there, but if he can give you anything offensively, that's a plus, especially with how much offense you're going to get from the rest of the lineup. And here's probably the best starting rotation in the MLB currently. And they still have a lot of talent that is not healthy. Blake Snell, I've already talked about it. Big offseason acquisition. One of the best pitchers in the world right now. Former Cy Young winner. Strikes out a lot of guys. Yoshinobu Yamamoto, another one of the best pitchers in the world. Was really, really good for Team Japan in the World Baseball Classic. I think he got hurt and struggled a little bit early, but he definitely had moments last year where he was that elite pitching prospect. And I think his second full year, you're really going to see him unlock it. Everybody knows what Tyler Glass now is capable of. One of the better pitchers in the MLB. Roki Sasaki. He's a rookie this year. He's viewed as the favorite to win NL Rookie of the Year. Another one of those elite Japanese pitching prospects. He's supposed to be the best one of them all. And then Dustin May, another young guy who probably won't be in the rotation very long for some of these guys coming back. But he's also really good, and there's a lot of teams that Dustin May would do a lot of good for. Notable bullpen arms. Oh, the Dodgers only have 3 closers at the back of their bullpen. Kendra Scott, Kirby Yates, and Blake Treinen have all closed games before. All of them are arguably elite in that back end, and the Dodgers have 3 of them. So not only do you have to deal with one of the best offenses, not only do you have to deal with the best pitching staff, but if you're somehow able to keep it close going into late the game, they have one of the best trios at the back end of their bullpen in the MLB too. This Dodgers team doesn't have any weaknesses. The only thing that's going to stop them this year, I think, is injuries. Which they already have a lot of, most of which coming over from last season. Shohei Ohtani, remember him? Yeah, he didn't pitch at all last year. He's supposed to be recovered enough from Tommy John at some point to return. He'll be in the rotation. Add another elite starting pitcher to the starting rotation. Again, a pitcher that had the first ever 50-50 season at the plate in MLB history. Then you have Clayton Kershaw, a guy who I think is just kind of on this team for vibes. I feel like he never pitches anymore. He's always hurt. He's still a first ballot Hall of Famer, still a World Series champ. It's hard to say exactly what he's going to do with how much he's injured, but definitely a piece where he, even though he's old and hurt, he still knows how to pitch. He's still a veteran guy that can add to rotation. I know Gavin Stone is most likely not going to be back for the end of the year, so maybe he doesn't return, but if he is able to sneak in for a playoff run, he was pretty darn good last year, and got better, it felt like, every single month. So if he is somehow able to return, there's another pitching piece. Tony Gonsolin, another guy who can never stay healthy, but when he is, he has some nasty stuff. Guess what? Michael Kopech and Evan Phillips, 2 more great bullpen pieces. And Michael Kopech, another guy with closer experience that is an elite back-end option. Add another one to the roster. And then Emmett Sheehan, another guy with ridiculous stuff that should be back. And he might not even have room in the starting rotation when he gets there. And then Bruce Dargatterall, a veteran, a lot of experience on the Dodgers in the bullpen. I don't know if they're going to need stabilization, but if they do, he can provide it when he gets back. This Dodgers team, I have being the best team in the MLB, and I know that's an incredibly hot take and that nobody believes that they will be, but I do. And obviously, I was being incredibly sarcastic. They seem like the best team pretty easily, and pretty much the consensus best team in the MLB coming into the season, which is why I spent so much time talking about them, because they have star power everywhere. Second place, a team that was almost eliminated the Dodgers before they won the World Series last year. Their Southern California rivals, the Padres. Who did the Padres add? Nothing too flashy, but some solid pieces in Nick Pivetta and Elias Diaz at catcher. Connor Joe, Jason Hayward, Jose Iglesias, Yuli Gurriel, all of those are not, star power guys, especially with some of them being older, but they are good platoon pieces that know how to play the game, can provide you with some offense and solid defense, and that's probably what the Padres are hoping on, and I think the Padres are going to be platooning quite a few positions, and just hoping to get offensive production out of them. Enough. Key subtractions, they lost a lot. Tanner Scott, Martin Perez, Jurickson Profar, Ha-Sung Kim, Kyle Higashioka, Donovan Solano. Not all those guys are big, but I definitely think they have more talent leaving the organization this offseason than talent they have coming in. Projected lineup. Luis Arraez, the on-base merchant, not going to hit you a lot of home runs, not going to see the bases, but he can get on base, take long at-bats. That's going to help the rest of the lineup to start games. Fernando Tatis, obviously the star on the big contract. Um, when healthy, Fernando Tatis is a 30-30 threat. I don't know if he can do 40-40. I wouldn't put it past him, but I don't feel nearly as confident saying that as 30-30. Fernando Tatis has power, has speed, great player. And those two guys are going to be tasked with setting it up for the young stud, Jackson Merrill. Great rookie season. He's only going to continue to get better. Most guys are not going to have the best year of their career in their rookie year. Don't think Jackson Merrill is either. And then some veterans at 4, 5, and 6 that are going to be tasked with driving in those runs, driving in the guys ahead of them. Machado is certainly capable of it. He's a very consistent offensive player and defensive player, usually plays as a lot of games. Xander Bogaerts, I think, had a down year last year, was hurt a little bit. I think he rebounds a little bit. 20-plus home runs with a 250 to 260 average is certainly possible. Maybe even a little bit better. I do think his best years are behind him in Boston. Jake Cronenworth, another guy with experience. And the 7-8-9 is intriguing. Brandon Lockridge, I think, is a question mark. I still think Jason Hayward's going to end up seeing more time in the outfield than him. Yuli Gurriel and Elias Diaz, two older guys, two vets. What do they give to the team? You're just looking for a little bit of offense especially when, maybe the rest of the lineup doesn't have it going. Just looking at guys to spark it when necessary. Rotation, you have a great 1-2 punch in King and Cease. Cease is probably the best pitcher on the roster. I think King might be starting. There's still a lot of talk that Cease could be traded before the end of the year, depending on how things go. So I'd keep my eye out there. Nick Pivetta, great innings eater. I expect him to eat innings and be an above-average guy, an above-average pitcher. And look at this, another team that has starting pitching injuries to start the year and has 2 question marks filling their space, and Kyle Hart and Randy Vasquez. I don't really know what to expect, just like a lot of other teams. But just as a lot of other guys, they have an opportunity to play themselves into the starting rotation. Notable bullpen arms. Robert Suarez, great closer, was great for them last year. I think he'll continue to do so. Jason Adam, I think, is still a little bit underloved. He's been pretty darn good out of the bullpen the last couple of years. And Jeremiah Estrada is an interesting piece that will help stir it up. I don't know. And as some guys get healthy, this Padres bullpen, I think, is really going to take shape and be elite. They got 3 starting pitchers. Musgrove might be out the whole year, might not be. I think he'll come back. And Yu Darvish and Matt Waldron should be back. And actually, all Darvish, Waldron, and Musgrove, all of them have a case to be in the starting rotation. If all 3 of them are healthy at the same time, you add them to what the Padres have. That's a pretty good starting rotation, and with no real weak spot. So if you're the Padres, part of this is getting healthy for you, especially at the starting pitching department. And then Johnny Brito and Brian Hoeing, I think, those are the 2 guys I was referencing with the bullpen. They get healthy, this Padres bullpen instantly gets better. The team that finished 3rd, and honestly a little bit disappointing, missing the playoffs after they went to the World Series in 2023, the Arizona Diamondbacks. And they didn't add a lot, but when they did add it, they took a big swing. Corbin Burns, one of the best pitchers in the MLB, has been for the last 5 years. Taking him away from the Orioles, Corbin Burns returning home. Great addition that is going to add to an already pretty darn good rotation. Kendall Graveman, great experienced guy in the bullpen. And then Josh Naylor, I think he'll slot in as a nice 4 or 5 hitter to help drive in some runs. You did lose a little bit on offense in Christian Walker and Jock Peterson and Kevin Newman and Josh Bell. I think they still have enough pieces, though, to make up for it. Definitely in the top half of the order. And then you lost a potential closer, definitely a 7th, 8th inning guy in Paul Sewald. But I think they'll be hopefully okay, because right now the biggest tool I see in this roster is the bullpen. But there's always opportunity to be found in bullpens in the MLB. Projected lineup. Ketel Marte, obviously, leadoff hitter. I don't think he's a guy who gets as much love as he sometimes deserves. Corbin Carroll, I think, took a little step back, but I think he's going to reestablish himself as one of the brightest young stars in the league this year. Going to have the best year of his career, which I guess this is really only his third full season. So maybe that's not saying much, but I think Corbin Carroll is going to have another breakout year and I guess put the ceiling even higher. Gurriel Jr., again, a reliable guy, kind of performs the same everywhere he goes. 20 plus home runs, going to drive in runs, and that's exactly why you put him at the 3 spot, so you can drive in Corbin Carroll and Kettle Marte. Already talked about Josh Naylor. Eugenio Suarez, I think, is an up and down guy, has power when he's playing well, has had some good years, has had some not so good years. But I think he likes playing in Arizona, and I think he's going to be a threat to consistently there have 20 plus home runs and 70, 80 RBIs, especially with who is batting in front of him this season. Randall Grichuk, another solid piece. Not a star, but he's an above he's slightly above average, I would say. You can't. It's very hard to have stars, so you just need to find solid contributors and role players, and that's what Grichuk has been for quite a few seasons. Knows his role, and I think he'll perform it well for the Diamondbacks. Gabriel Moreno, good catcher for them, definitely can do worse. Catchers are such a weird position. We don't expect a lot out of so many of them, but you also don't want them to be awful and drag their team down, and Moreno will definitely not do that. Jake McCarthy, is this finally the year he puts it all together? I feel like the MLB's been waiting for it for a while. Can he put it together? And at the very minimum, can he just get on base where he can utilize his wheels and steal some bases? And then Perdomo, I think it's going to be the same old Geraldo Perdomo that the Arizona Diamondbacks are used to this season. And here's the biggest strength of their team to me, the starting rotation. Zach Gallen and Corbin Burns might be the best 1-2 punch in the MLB. There's only a few teams that can match it. I would hate to see them both in a series because you could be getting shut down 2 games in a row. Merrill Kelly is a really good number 3 that isn't talked about a lot. Eduardo Rodriguez, when does he finally rebound? Eduardo Rodriguez has had some elite years. Can he return to that elite status after a somewhat shaky 2024? And then Brandon Pfaadt, kind of a question mark to me, but he's shown a little bit, and he's also given up a little bit, but you can do worse at the 5. I think the Diamondbacks maybe want to upgrade there, but maybe they're content and saying our top 4 should be good enough to win us a lot of games, and that certainly should be the case. Notable bullpen arms, Jason Martinez and AJ Puk. I put those 2 guys. I don't think the closer battle will settle there. I think either one of these guys could be the closer come opening day. I don't know which one, and if one of them struggles, I'm sure the other one will get some looks. I think that's the important part of this Arizona bullpen. Who is the closer? And then obviously they have 2, I would say, of their best 4 or 5 relievers still to return from injury. Jordan Montgomery is no longer returning from injury. I believe he is getting Tommy John. He will miss the year. And man, that would be the perfect 5th pitcher there, especially if he could be his 2023 self when the Rangers won the World Series. And then the 2 aforementioned relievers that will be back in Kevin Ginkel and Kendall Graveman, that I think will help shore up a bullpen that might be a little bit shaky early on in the year while they're figuring out roles. San Francisco Giants, the 4th place finishers in this division last year. The biggest addition for them obviously being the big contract they gave Willie Ademez. They struck out on a lot of guys. Ademez is a solid piece, especially if he can help shore up the offense, because I'm still not confident that I'm still not too overly confident in that offense this year outside of him. Justin Verlander, yes, that is a spelling mistake. That is the Justin Verlander over 40 that you are thinking of. I put it there. He could be good. He could be bad. He's really old. You never know what you're going to get. He was hurt most of last year. I don't know. To be determined, I guess. And then obviously losing some good depth outfield pieces in Conforto and Canha. They traded away Taylor Rogers, who was one of their better bullpen guys, splitting the brothers up. And then obviously the biggest loss for them is the elite starting pitcher, Blake Snell, going to their division rivals, the Dodgers. And then this projected lineup, I think there's going to be a lot of movement throughout the year here. Um, but this was my best swing at who I see starting opening day for them. Lamont Wade Jr., same old Lamont Wade Jr. from last year. I think that's kind of the player he is. Willie Ademez, 30 home run power out of the shortstop. You take it, even if he doesn't quite hit 30 every year. Maybe it's a high 20s. You're still going to take it. Provides good defense. He plays every day. Ademis is going to have to play well for this Giants team to have any chance at making the playoffs. Jung Ho Lee, a to be determined guy out of Korea. Sometime I think it's a little bit easier to project the Japanese league than it is the Korean league, and for that reason, it's kind of hard for me to say what I think Jung Ho Lee is going to do. But I think that they're pretty high on them. I think a lot of people are. And I will say a lot about the guys that come over from the KBO. They play the game. They're going to make contact. They're going to make pitchers work, and they're going to hustle around. And I see Jung Ho Lee being one of those guys. I don't know if I see him doing too much power. But the three guy, you don't always need power out of a three guy. You don't always need 30 home runs. I think the Giants are going to be playing maybe a little bit more small ball this year just because they don't have the power to compete with a lot of other teams. Got to find ways to win. Matt Chapman had a resurgent year last year after a rough 2023. I think that's closer to the Matt Chapman that we all expect, and he will continue to be. I think he's going to have a big RBI, lots of home runs, lots of doubles, show lots of power, just like Ademis is going to have to for them to have a solid offense. And I wouldn't be surprised to see him move up to the 3 spot either. Helio Ramos, again, a lot of these guys, part of my concern with the Giants is I don't see a lot of these guys with room to expand their game. I see them being the same guy that they have been last year, the last 2 or 3 years, and Helio Ramos falls into that group. Patrick Bailey, I think, is still I still think he has some problems. If he takes a small step up, I think he could go miles for the Giants. I don't know if it happens or not, but both Buster Posey is in that building, and maybe that means something for a young catcher. Wilmer Flores and Mike Yastrzemski, we know who they are. They've been around for the Giants for a while. You know exactly what you're getting from them. Tyler Fitzgerald is a question mark. There's some players. I do a lot of research. I did a lot on Tyler Fitzgerald, and there's some guys I have no read on, and Tyler Fitzgerald is one of them. Therefore, I put him in the 9th spot. This rotation should still be strong for the Giants, though. Definitely going to be the strength of the team. They're going to have to hold teams to not a lot of runs because I don't see the Giants consistently scoring. Logan Webb, all reliable. He's always pitching, doesn't really get hurt, always at the top of that rotation. And he's quite good in addition to all those things. Justin Verlander, if he can stay healthy, I still think, he is Justin Verlander, and for a long time, Father Time never caught up with him. If Father Time has officially caught up with him, he could be in trouble this year. But you fight him off for one more year, and this Giants rotation is looking pretty good. Robbie Ray, another old veteran who is pretty consistent. I think you know what you're going to get from Robbie Ray. I expect the same old Robbie Ray this year that we've seen for however many of the last couple of years. Jordan Hicks, closer turned starter. It's kind of interesting. We have a couple of those this year. A couple of them from the last couple of years, I should say. Elite stuff, and I think another full year as a starter is going to help him go a long way, and I think this year will be better than last. Kyle Harrison is still has been their best pitching prospect. Last year was his first full years in the majors, kind of was up and down. One more year, it's definitely going to help him. I think he continues to get better, which would be really good to have a second lefty that you can rely on in your rotation. I think Harrison improves and unlocks more of his game. Notable bullpen arms. Ryan Walker is going to get the chance to be closer, but I don't think he has it locked up. I know that they say he's officially the opening day closer, but Camilo Doval was a pretty dominant closer for a decent amount of time for the Giants. I know he struggled at most of last year, but I still don't think you can completely keep him out. Doval moves into the setup role, but I think it's temporary, and I would not be shocked if Doval ends the year as the closer over Ryan Walker. Tyler Rogers, they got rid of his brother Taylor, but I still think Tyler is really good. I don't think it affects him too much, and he definitely is going to contribute, and he's going to have to for this bullpen to be good. A lot of players that need to be as advertised for the Giants this year. That's kind of their theme. And then Hayden Birdsong, somebody that was trying to make a run. Another young guy that people are very high on that was made a run at the rotation, didn't quite make it. I'm interested if they do one of those things where they turn a starting pitcher prospect into a dominant late inning guy. Do they use him as long relief to keep him mostly stretched out, or does he get another crack at the starting rotation? I think it's too early not to give him at least another try, and it might come at some point this year the way starting pitching injuries work out. Keep an eye on Hayden Birdsong because I think that's a very interesting storyline for the Giants most of this year. I think there's only one key guy for them returning from injury in Gerard Encarnacion. You're not a lot of major league at bats, but I think he's going to have to be a contributor at some point this season for the Giants to have any hope at making the playoffs. He's going to need to be an everyday guy in the outfield, and he's going to need to contribute. Again, a lot of times it takes guys a couple of weeks, and that's understandable. But I think the Giants are hoping he gets it quicker than most, I would say. And then the last team in the season preview, one of the worst teams in the MLB, the Colorado Rockies. I have a little bit more to say about them than I did for teams like the Marlins and the White Sox. Key additions, Kyle Farmer, solid infield piece. Thairo Estrada, solid infield piece. I think Scott Alexander at some point has a say in that bullpen. They did lose Cal Quantrill, who was a fun player for them, especially last year. And Brendan Rodgers, a long-time fan favorite, I would say, never quite lived up to the hype, leaving the Rockies. So there's only a couple guys I want to point out in this roster because the rest of it I feel like is replacement-level guys with not a lot of major league at-bats that don't really have a high calling, or not a high calling, but like they're not highly touted prospects. That's the fair way to say it. They don't have a lot of major league at bats outside of, Ryan McMahon in the three hole does. But I want to point out Brenton Doyle absolutely broke out last year. He seems to be an absolute stud. Great defense in center field, has speed on the base pass, has power. I mean, that was his first full year in the majors. I think he's only going to get better this year. I think this year he's going to find a way to elevate his game and get to that peak that he can stay at for years and years. I loved watching Brenton Doyle. He's a fun player. Ezekiel Tovar, another highly touted prospect, definitely found some better footing last year. I think his third year in the majors is when he's got to start showing it. He's slowly been getting there, and I think he gets there this year. And I think Tovar and Doyle, the two of them, can give this Rockies fan base a heck of a lot of hope. And then Chris Bryant, he's a far cry from the player that won the World Series with the Cubs and that the Rockies envisioned when they gave him a lot of money. I think for the Rockies and Bryant, you just want him to show some signs of being that guy. I don't know if he'll ever be as good as he was at his prime, but if he can just play decent for you this year, maybe it attracts some suitors and he gets traded. But obviously, Bryant, as an older vet, does not want to be part of a rebuild, in my opinion. Maybe he's happy collecting the paycheck. But if you're the Rockies, why not see if you can get him going again and trade him to a team that might be desperate at the trade deadline? And then the rest of these guys, have some mixed experience, but none of them excite me too much. Michael Toglia, Kyle Farmer, Nick Martini, Jordan Beck, Jacob Stallings. Nothing there screams out to me. Maybe somebody surprises me. That happens sometimes on these rebuilding teams. You'll have a guy or two come out of nowhere. But I think this top four is going to be good enough to carry the Rockies to a few more wins than they got last year and prevent them from being the worst team in the MLB. Rotation has some pretty good pieces, even with one of them hurt. Kyle Freeland has put up some pretty good numbers in his career. I expect him to continue to be good. Herman Marquez falls into there. I'm interested to see what Ryan Felter does. Obviously, Austin Gomber, until not too long ago, was in that starting rotation until he got hurt. He's going to miss the season, and I think he'll be back relatively quick. Antonio Santazala is another guy that they need to be good that has major league experience. So this rotation has some decent experience, especially when Gomber gets back. Experience is important as a starting pitcher. That's why I harp on it so much. To the point where this rotation maybe is better than some people may realize for the Rockies this year. And then the big name I want to point out that I think is going to get the fifth spot in the rotation with Austin Gomber out. Bradley Blaylock, highly touted prospect, has pretty darn good stuff. I expect to see him to get a full chance while Gomber's on the injured list, and maybe he makes the most of that chance and stays there. I don't really know who to expect. These are the three guys in Victor Vodnik, Tyler Kinley, and Seth Halverson that I expect to see at the back of that bullpen. And Vodnik and Kinley in particular, I think, are the guys that are going to get a chance to take the closer job. They haven't announced an official closer, and I think it's because they're going to let these guys play the competition out during the season. And then I've mentioned Gomber to return from injury, and then Thairo Estrada is definitely going to get some playing time when he gets back, filling in all around the infield. National League West projections. Again, I'm not going to go through everything. Fangraphs, Pacoda, and Ben on Sports, all of our metrics agree that the Dodgers have the best, should finish with the best record in the MLB this year. As I believe the Dodgers are the only team in Fangraphs, or one of only two teams in Fangraphs to hit 90 wins. They're the only team in Pacoda to hit 100, and they're the only team I predict to hit 100. This Dodgers team has a legitimate chance to break the record for the most wins in the regular season. I don't know if they do or not. That's not what their eyes are set on. So it wouldn't surprise me if they rest guys or they had some injuries. For the Dodgers, the season won't start until they get into the playoffs. The Padres, I think, take a small step back. They're a real threat to miss the playoffs. I think their stars are going to have to perform. I think in previous years they've been super deep. I think they lost their depth this year, but there's still enough star power to carry them to the playoffs at the top of that order and at the top of the pitching rotation. The Diamondbacks, I expect to pass the Padres because I think they do have the depth. They have one of the better starting rotations in the MLB, and I think the offense will do enough to score runs for that dominant rotation. As long as that bullpen holds up, Diamondbacks looking like a playoff team, and I think they definitely have enough to pass the Padres in this division. The Giants, I see them maybe being 500. I just don't see it offensively, and I don't see the consistency in the rotation. I see some guys that could be in the rotation, but there's too many question marks for me to be for sure. I think this Giants team is going to be another year of not good enough to make a run, but not bad enough to get a super high draft pick, and they're going to still be stuck in that lingo. And then the Rockies, I mean, right around where they were last year. I think maybe they can get to 70 wins if things break right for them. But I think outside of 3 or 4 guys, the team is pretty bad, and I think they're going to be trading away guys at the trade deadline again this season. Here you can see average record. Average them all up. Dodgers are the only team that has an average over 100 wins at 102.67 and 59.33. Padres at 84 and 78, looking around for a wild card, firmly in the wild card race. Diamondbacks firmly in the wild card race at 87.33 and 74.67. Giants just under 500 at 78.67 and 83.33. And then the Rockies firmly in the cellar, being a cellar dweller at 60 and 102. Now, I know it took a long time. I appreciate you guys for sticking around this long. I'm now going to show you what the playoff bracket would look like with using the average record. So the average records will be determining playoff seeding and who makes it in the National League. And this is what it would look like. A really fun Mets-Phillies series in the first round. I'm not going to go through and analyze all these matchups. There's still 162 games to play for most of these teams, 160 for 2 of them. So I'm not going to go too in-depth. The episode's already long enough. I don't know why I said 2024. I don't know about you guys, but I'm still writing 2024 on important documents and papers and stuff. So that's probably why I did it again. I apologize. But without spending too much time on this, Phillies, Mets first round. Mets win the face of the Dodgers. Diamondbacks upsetting the Cubs round 1. Braves, Diamondbacks, Braves, Dodgers, Mets, Dodgers beating the Braves in what is probably the real World Series, because I think those are the 2 best teams in the league this year, with the Dodgers advancing. Now, if you have not watched my American League episode, go watch it now, because I'm about to show a spoiler. I am going to show you guys the World Series with the team I had making it out of the American League. So if you don't want spoilers, pause here and go back there. Dodgers, Rangers. I have the Dodgers beating the Rangers. Sorry for another long episode. I know it's the 2 back-to-back long episodes, but I really wanted to get in depth with this MLB season that is starting. Thank you for taking time out of your days and your weeks for listening. It means a lot. Let me know your hot takes. Let me know your predictions in the comments. And let me know if you like this new style of season predictions. I've done them for a lot of different sports now. This has been the most in-depth one, but consequentially, it's also been the longest. Let me know if you like that, or let me know if you want me to go back to the old format that's a little bit shorter, but not as comprehensive. Have a good time. Everybody take time this weekend. Have March of Madness on one TV. Have MLB opening weekend on the other. It should be a great sports weekend. There's always an excuse to sit on your couch and watch sports. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Take care of yourselves. Take care of your families, even if it means watching sports with them. Peace out, everybody.